It was early in the morning in Jerusalem, a city where every stone, every street, and every shadow seems to carry the weight of centuries of history. The sun had just begun to light up the golden dome of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, one of the holiest and most politically sensitive places on earth. For Muslims, it is the third holiest site after Mecca and Medina. For Jews, the same site is revered as the Temple Mount, the location of two ancient Jewish temples. This small area is sacred to both faiths and at the heart of one of the Al-Sisi as one of the Tage's world's most intractable conflicts. On this particular morning, an Israeli government minister arrived quietly, surrounded by a small group of aides and security personnel. His visit, however, was not a routine one, unlike some past political figures who have visited under the guise of inspection or tourism. This minister went further. He prayed openly at the site. To some observers, this might seem like a simple act of personal faith. But in the context of Jerusalem's history, such an act is loaded with meaning and risk. For decades, there has been a fragile understanding, known as the status quo, governing how the holy site is managed. Under this arrangement, Muslims are allowed to pray at the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, while Jews and other non-Muslims can visit but not pray there. This delicate agreement has been in place since Israel captured East Jerusalem from Jordan during the 1967 Six-Day War. The reaction wasn't limited to Jerusalem. Across the West Bank, Palestinian officials issued strong condemnations. The Palestinian Authority described the minister's action as an unprecedented provocation, warning that it could trigger unrest. Hamas, the militant group that controls Gaza, called it a red line and promised consequences if such acts continued. From the Israeli side, government officials offered mixed responses. Some ministers defended the visit, saying that Jews have the right to pray anywhere in Jerusalem, including on the Temple Mount. They argued that freedom of worship should apply to all faiths equally, and accused critics of using religion to inflame tensions. Others, however, privately expressed concern that the act would undermine security, especially at a time when violence between Israelis and Palestinians had already been on the rise. For Israel's security forces, the timing could not have been more difficult. In recent months, the city had seen a spike in confrontations, from stone throwing in the Old City to deadly attacks in various neighborhoods. Any incident at the Al-Aqsa compound risked becoming a catalyst for wider violence, as has happened many times before. The police and military began preparing for possible protests and clashes, deploying reinforcements around the Old City and other sensitive locations. Internationally, the reaction was swift. Jordan, which is the official custodian of Islamic holy sites in Jerusalem, condemned the act and summoned Israel's ambassador for an explanation. Other Muslim-majority countries, including Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Indonesia, issued statements, warning that such actions could escalate tensions not just in Jerusalem but across the Middle East. The United Nations called for calm and urged all parties to respect the status quo arrangements at the holy site. To understand why this incident resonated so deeply, it's important to revisit the history of the site. For centuries, control of the area has shifted between empires and rulers, from the Islamic caliphates to the Crusaders, from the Ottoman Empire to the British Mandate, and finally to modern-day Israel and Jordanian oversight. The status quo has been tested many times. In 2000, a visit by then-opposition leader Ariel Sharon to the compound sparked the Second Intifada, a Palestinian uprising that lasted more than 4 years and claimed thousands of lives. In more recent years, sporadic confrontations at the site have triggered waves of violence across the region. That is why any high-profile visit, especially by an Israeli minister, is seen as far more than a personal act. It is a political signal with potential consequences for Palestinians. Acts like this feed into a broader narrative of encroachment. They see growing numbers of Jewish visitors to the site, escorted by security forces as part of a gradual effort to change the character and control of the area. For many Israelis, however, visiting and praying there is a matter of religious freedom and national heritage. These conflicting narratives make compromise extremely difficult. On the ground, the consequences of the minister's prayer were immediate. Security forces reported small protests in parts of East Jerusalem and Hebron. Social media platforms lit up with videos and photos of the visit, accompanied by angry commentary and calls for action. Rumors began to circulate, often exaggerated or false, fueling further tension. Religious leaders from both communities called for restraint, but their messages were often drowned out by the louder voices of political leaders and activists. In a city where the sacred and the political are deeply intertwined, separating faith from politics is almost impossible. As the day went on, Israeli security forces increased their presence around the Old City, setting up checkpoints and monitoring entrances. International mediators, including officials from Egypt and the United States, quietly reached out to both Israeli and Palestinian leaders, urging them to avoid steps that could escalate the situation. The hope was to prevent a single incident from snowballing into a larger crisis, something that has happened all too often in the past. For the Israeli minister at the center of the controversy, the visit may have been intended as a statement of religious conviction or political principle. But in Jerusalem, where symbolism matters as much as substance, every action carries multiple meanings. To supporters, it was an affirmation of Jewish rights in the city. To opponents, it was a deliberate provocation at one of the most sensitive spots in the world. The coming days will determine whether this incident fades into the background or becomes another flashpoint in the long-running conflict. What is certain is that the Golden Dome of Al-Aqsa will continue to stand as both a beacon of faith and a reminder of the deep divisions that run through this ancient city in Jerusalem. The past is never truly past, and the present is always shaped by the weight of history. Every prayer, every stone, every gesture can become part of a larger story, one that has been told for centuries and shows no sign of ending anytime soon.